excited to be kind of going through the ins and outs of Web3, what Web3 is, the different opportunities, within the ecosystem, and also the opportunities to transition from Web2 into Web3. So my background is in cybersecurity, and that's kind of how I got into blockchain, because the cryptography aspects of it were really interesting to me. And then when Ethereum was launched, I really saw the potential to start building decentralized applications, decentralized, tools. And so I kind of made my transition 2017 from cybersecurity, kind of dabbling into blockchain, and then 2018 was when I kind of fully committed the career switch. So yeah, I guess to start, I will very quickly go through, what's the difference between Web 1, Web 2, and Web 3? Because I get a lot of questions of like, well, Web 3, Web 2, like, is there a Web 1, and how did we get here? So I'm going to very kind of quickly go through that, so we're all on the same page of like, what exactly is Web 3, and how is it different than the other phases of the internet? So there actually is a Web 1. And this just refers to the first stage of the internet, right? So personal web pages were really common. And this was mostly static personal pages. And these were hosted on like ISP run servers, or on just free web hosting services. In Web 1, advertisements on websites were banned, which is kind of crazy to think now. And basically, Web 1 was a content delivery network, and this allowed authors to showcase information on their websites. And it's called Web 1 because information flowed one way, right? It flowed outwards from creators to consumers, but there was no inward flow. So it was a one-way flow of information, and it was static. Then enters Web 2, which everyone is probably most familiar with. It's how I'm speaking to you guys today. And Web 2 modified the way the web pages were designed and used. So interaction and collaboration with each other became possible in Web 2. Social media is probably the biggest difference between Web 1 and Web 2. That was kind of the big defining factor. So now, right, content creators can interact with others in a virtual community, right? Think, Instagram and Facebook. So there's a two-way flow of information, right? Web 2 is an enhanced version of Web 1, because whereas you had information flowing one way, now you have information flowing back and forth. So there's a two-way flow, hence Web 2. And then Web 3, right? What the heck is Web 3? How did we get here? What's the difference between that and the internet that I'm used to using? So Web 3 refers to the evolution of Web 2. And that's basically kind of the biggest differentiating factor is the ability to alter the web into an open source database, right? So in Web 3, data is no longer owned, but it's shared. And you can showcase and interact with data in a much more decentralized and open way than you ever could with Google or Facebook. So we think of Web 2 as being open, as being as being kind of open, permissionless, anyone can join and interact. But if you think about it, Web 2 is really owned by two tech giants. That's Facebook and Google, right? And all of the data that's being generated on these servers, it's centrally held on closed servers, right? Nobody can interact with kind of the back end. Nobody can see the code that's running that powers these algorithms. No one can really see what's being done with the data, as it's all closed and it's black box. So this means that there's really two companies essentially running the World Wide Web and controlling the world's data and internet traffic. Whereas with Web 3, anyone can, join the network. Anyone can see all the information that's ever been posted to the network. Anyone can host a node on the network. And also, for me, the selling point really was, if I want to join, the Ethereum network and start building a dApp, I can hop on, start building, and then ship my app, right? Whereas with Web 2, right, you'd have to get a software license, or say you want to start building on Facebook, you would have to apply for a job and then kind of build under Facebook's umbrella, which they would, own the data, the source code, and they would ultimately control the app that you built. So that's kind of the high level overview of Web 1 versus Web 3, right? So Web 1, one kind of outward flow of information. Web 2, you have this two-way flow. And then Web 3, it really refers to the decentralized aspect, that data is no longer centrally held on private servers, that it's decentralized, anyone can access it, anyone can join and anyone can build in a much more kind of free and open framework and capacity. So I will stop there very briefly if anyone has any questions about Web3, the difference, and if not, I'll get into kind of the actual skills that are in demand for Web3, but just want to stop there if anyone has any initial questions. No? All right. So let's talk about the hard skills that are really in demand for Web3. So this is for folks who are engineers, who are software developers, who are coders. So if you're thinking of making the transition from Web 2 into Web 3, there's three kind of main languages that are in demand, and there's three languages that if you are proficient or have a grasp on any one of these three, you're gonna find a job in Web 3 pretty easily. The first one is JavaScript, right? JavaScript has been around forever. It's super versatile, and it can be used in Web 2 and in Web 3 for nearly anything, right? From client side to server side, so developing front end versus back end functionalities and applications. It can be used for things like making web pages interactive, building web servers, creating server apps, creating web and mobile apps, and even gaming. And you can also build on the blockchain, right? You can build applications on the blockchain. You can also build your own blockchain in JavaScript. So basically, the way that apps on Web3 work is that the front end is still the same, right? You're going to build your front end most typically in JavaScript so that the user experience and the user interaction is very seamless. It's very kind of similar to what we would interact with in a Web 2 app. The difference, though, is that the backend, right, the API calls are made to the decentralized network rather than a central server. So if you work with JavaScript, if you're a front end developer, it's going to be a pretty easy transition into Web3. It's just that API call and kind of the backend in the libraries that you use to connect the two that are going to change. And speaking of libraries in JavaScript, I'd say the three main libraries that are used and that I would really recommend looking into if you're interested in making the switch would be Web3.js and Ether.js. And again, this is all open source. There's a bunch of free tutorials on YouTube. There's a lot of great information right on the documentation site as well as on Stack Overflow, GitHub. And that's the nice thing about Web3 is that it's decentralized, it's open. All of this information is readily accessible. And the expectation of having a computer science degree for an entry-level position doesn't exist in Web3 because everyone's just looking for programmers, everyone's looking for developers. Also, if anyone's familiar with React, right? React is a JavaScript library for building user interfaces. For blockchain, you would use React Native, a mobile app development framework that's very commonly used in blockchain. For example, Coinbase Wallet, Crypto.com Wallet, and MetaMask, which are the three largest Web3 wallets. These are all created using this React Native framework. So yeah, JavaScript is kind of the most universal language that you can very easily transition. Well, I say very easily, but it's easy to transition JavaScript kind of Web 2 into Web 3 since it's largely the same. Like I said, it's just that interaction with the back end and then some slight functionality on the front end that are going to differ from Web 2 to Web 3. The next
there was a quick question about Web 1 and if Web 1 is still used by some companies today.
Not really, because like I said, there's the static element of it just makes it like very awkward to use. And also because of kind of the new developments in JavaScript that are being implemented on front end pages, it doesn't really work anymore because things like advertising, right? Things like inward flow of information, which is like consumer data, right? Like that was the thing with Web 1 is that there was no advertising, there was no two-way flow of information, also meaning there was no way to collect things like cookies didn't exist, right? Like location data, none of this was flowing back into the web page. So maybe for some like static databases or some like closed web repositories, maybe some university repository, there may be some that are using it because they're super legacied or they're just, kind of built-in closed systems. But forward-facing web, no, just because, again, the functionalities that we basically have come to expect and that web pages need now to function are not possible anymore with Web 1.
Awesome, thank you. Sorry, that's a great question. Thanks.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean, basically, Web 1 is not attractive because the Facebooks and the Googles of the world can't collect your data and sell it, so no one wants to use it anymore. But yeah, sorry. Yeah, and again, if I've missed a question, just like hop in and be like, "Hello, hi, I'm lost over here," or like, "I need clarification." Just yeah, interrupt me and I'll answer any questions you guys have. So I would say yeah. So there's two more languages, and these are more blockchain native languages. The first one is Solidity. Solidity is the Ethereum programming language, and that's used for writing smart contracts on different blockchain platforms within the EVM. So the EVM is the Ethereum virtual machine. That's kind of the umbrella term for any application that runs using the Ethereum network. So what Solidity does is Solidity is the language that programs logic into your smart contracts, which then dictate how your dApps. So a dApp is a decentralized application, basically an application built on Web3. So your programs, anything that you're building, this is going to be the logic that dictates how they interact with other elements and also how they function. So for a wallet app, for example, right, the front end would be written in JavaScript, and it would be kind of very user friendly. You can deposit funds, you can withdraw funds, you can send funds. Solidity comes in on the back end, and this would be the logic that powers your wallet, right? So for the wallet app, Solidity could program if sender enters recipient information correctly and has sufficient funds, then transfer ownership of coins from sender account to recipient account. So these are two very common languages that are going to work together to really power not only the front end, the back end, and the logic that dictates these decentralized applications that you can build in Web3. Solidity, it's very similar to programming languages like C++ and Python, as well as JavaScript. And this was done on purpose to make it easier for Web 2 developers to start building on Web 3. So really, if you want to get into Web 3 kind of on the server side, right on the back end, I would really suggest learning Solidity, as it's really the de facto language, right, in blockchain right now. So, if you want to make the jump, I would say learn Solidity. And again, there's paid courses on Coursera, Udemy. You can usually get these on sale for like 10 or 20 bucks. Or there's really great documentation everywhere from the actual, Solidity documentation site to YouTube videos, free courses. There's a lot of great resources to start learning Solidity if you're interested. The last one would be Rust. Rust is one of my favorite languages. It's very similar to Lisp or Haskell, if you're familiar with them. Basically, Solidity is the most popular blockchain programming language, but it won't work if you want to build on other blockchains like Solana, Near, or Polkadot, which are very up-and-coming blockchains. You'll have to use Rust to build out smart contracts. Ethereum also uses Rust for various use cases as well. Basically, Rust apps are popular in blockchain because, again, this is a little bit technical, but the memory management approach is compiled alongside them, which results in a really low runtime cost. So when you're developing any sort of cryptocurrency applications, it's great because you can write cryptographic functions in a really quick and secure language. So Rust is not written for blockchain, but it's been co-opted and is a very kind of up-and-coming and scaled language in blockchain development. And if you're interested in learning a language that's very in demand, Rust would be it. It's really beginner friendly, thanks to tools like the compiler, the build system, and the test facilities. And if you're looking for cryptocurrency engineering jobs, I mean, for every one person who writes, who can code in Rust proficiently, or even a beginner in Rust for blockchain, there's probably 10 to 50 jobs out there, right? There's a huge demand for Rust developers in blockchain. So yeah, those are kind of the three, hard skills, right? The three programming languages that I would recommend looking into or looking to learn for blockchain if you're looking to make that transition from Web 2 dev to Web 3 dev. I don't see, oh, let me see. What about non-technical people? Yes, that is my next. My next kind of transition is into soft skills for Web 3. So I work for a blockchain company. I'm the community manager. So what that means is our Discord, our Telegram, our Twitter, I basically foster and build community, right? So our blockchain, the way that this is kind of the interesting thing between Web 1 and Web 3, right? Web 2 and Web 3, is that all of the positions that are, available in Web 2, marketing, business development, content writer, PR, event management, journalism, everything, graphic designer, everything that exists in Web 2 is very in demand in Web 3. So the difference is that in Web 2, right, things are kind of, again, closed source, right? So when you're building, a product, you don't really build community alongside it because you have advertisements, and that's kind of the way that you interact with community. With Web 3, everything is open source, right? Your code is open source. All of your libraries are open source. The roadmap, is also open source, so people can kind of see what you're building. And a lot of these programs, a lot of these companies are going to have token sales, right? So people follow the development of the project, then they're able to actually buy in and buy tokens, which can lead to, voting rights, and stuff like that. So a very important part of Web3 is your community. So you want to be growing, your Discord channels, your Telegram channels, your Twitter following, and you want to be sharing every single aspect of the project. You want to be introducing really fun, initiatives and ways for your community to get involved, and you also want to have that constant flow of information, engineering updates, sale updates, progress updates, roadmap updates. So that's kind of the unique thing, right? Is that in, your marketing, it's not just here's our product, here's why you should buy it. It's, here's what we're about, here's the community, here's how you can join the community and start to interact with the community and become, an ambassador, right? A lot of these all these projects have ambassador programs. So I mean, like I said, anything that you can do in Web3, product manager, customer success agent, researcher, right? Analyst. There's cryptocurrency VC funds if you're more interested in, the kind of the pure crypto side of it. Headhunters, recruiters, consulting, accounting. These are all very in-demand positions in Web3 because you have the engineers, right? There's obviously engineers, that are building the product, but then there's this new approach to marketing the product, which is very open and community focused. And so if you want to make that, say you're in marketing for a Web 2 company, for Web 3, it's kind of, to make that transition, you have to get your head around that every single aspect of this is open, because eventually you want your, clients to become owners of the product, right? You want them to be buying the token, to be staking the token, to be building on the network that you're building. So community and kind of communication is a core tenet of everything that you're going to be doing. And so for something like somebody who's in sales, if you're in sales for, say, Salesforce, right? The way you close a sale is that people buy into your subscription or they buy your product. With Web3, for example, the sales portion, you're not actually making sales. What you're doing is you're partnering with other companies who then maybe integrate with your product or start building on your product. So it's a little different because there's no actual like exchange of funds. It's just, you've been able to negotiate a successful partnership where, like I said, people are building on your platform or integrating your product with their platform. So all of these jobs are super, super in demand, right? Like one company that I was looking at yesterday, who we're thinking of partnering with, they have 110 open positions on their website, right? So things like that you would expect in Web 2, right, which is like 3-4 years of experience, or bachelor's degree or a master's, that's completely off the table in Web 3. The industry is just looking for really motivated, really talented individuals, who are willing to make that transition and who are willing to kind of help build something new, right? Like that's the exciting thing about Web 3, is that everything you're building is setting a precedent as being the first, right? Ethereum launched in 2016, right? So the industry as we know it is less than 10 years old. So there's a lot of opportunity. And my biggest piece of advice if you're looking to get into Web3 is just apply. There's so many jobs, there's so many positions that these companies are looking to fill. Even if they say they're looking for 1 to 3 years, just apply. And a lot of it is kind of learning on the fly, which is, let me just stop to see if there's questions. Nope. Okay. This is kind of the last part of this talk, is that there are some things that no one really tells you about working in Web3. Is that a lot of the time, not only are you kind of making it up as you go and learning as you go, but the company is too, right? So a lot of the times you're going to be working for a startup or a very young company. So you have to very much be an advocate for yourself. You have to advocate, the style of work that works for you. If you use he, she pronouns, that's something that people are going to be used to. If you use they, them pronouns, or another set of pronouns, a lot of the time people are never going to, have heard of this or have worked in an environment where that's the case, right? There's no HR at these companies for the most part, unless they're very big. So, and it's not, I don't mean to say that like everyone is, it's a scary place to work, but you do have to be kind of a self advocate, and you have to be comfortable with setting work boundaries, also setting personal boundaries, and kind of championing things that you're comfortable with, and things that you would like kind of done. So if you really like a 9 to 5 model where you kind of start at this time, end at this time, and have a very kind of, I don't know the word for it, but like a routine. Web3, you may have to find kind of your niche in Web3 that works for you. Because like I said, it's very easy to work through the night and work through the weekends. But again, you're going to have to really kind of be an advocate for your time, be an advocate for the way that you like to work. And if you have pronouns, right, that are not he, she, then you need to kind of speak up and get people used to that. Because like I said, the culture is a little bit like kind of ad hoc, right? I don't know a lot of companies in Web3. Can you give us examples of Web3 in Canada? So one of the biggest examples is they're called Dapper Labs. They're based out of Vancouver. They created NBA Top Shot, which is a line of NFTs that are connected to real world kind of like so NFTs, non-fungible tokens, basically digital pieces of art. They created a line with the NBA. It's called NBA Top Shot. So you can buy digital kind of sports cards for your favorite players and your favorite teams. So that's what they're building. They're also building out a bunch of Web3 games where the things like you can buy like the skins for your characters, they're NFTs, so you own them. Another really cool company is ShakePay Wallet, which is it's a way for Canadians to buy, sell, and hold cryptocurrency. That's based out of Toronto. And my company, Axeler, is also Canadian based. I will share all of these links. And we are hiring. We're hiring. I mean, every company is hiring. We're hiring for technical and non-technical roles. Shameless, shameless plug there. Let me drop these links here. What do you think about? I'm not too familiar with this Zilliqa and their metabolist. Should I learn? I mean, it just, I guess if you're looking like, so for this question from Zane, like Dapper Labs, they use their own programming language called Flow, right? So if you're looking for a job at a very specific kind of place, right? If you're like, I really want to work at Dapper Labs, then you're going to have to learn the Flow blockchain language. So I would say like the recommendations I gave are kind of higher level, like across the board, good to haves. If you're looking for a job at a very specific company, or if you're like, okay, I want to work here because I really love what they're building, then you should learn those kind of those blockchain specific or that company specific language. And I know that's kind of becoming the trend, especially for things in the metaverse. There's a lot of companies that are developing their own programming languages. But yeah, if you want to learn, if you want to work at a specific company and they have a language that they've written, it's good to, obviously you're going to have to work in that language, but a lot of the logic and kind of like the syntax is going to be taken from those 3 languages that I shared before. Do you have recommendations for resources to learn more about Web3? What I would recommend if you're just getting started, if you're like, okay, I'm every level from like I'm a senior developer who wants to transition to like what the heck is blockchain, courses on Udemy and courses on Coursera, they go on sale every month. Don't pay the full price. They're always on sale for like $10 or $20. They're really, really fantastic resources. Um, these are going to give you a foundation of like, you know, what is blockchain? How do I get started? Or, how do I learn Solidity for basic smart contracts, all the way up to how do I learn Solidity for very scaled and like intricate smart contracts. The reason that I would recommend kind of buying one of these courses is that it's very clearly laid out, so that if you want to just start learning on your own, it can be very intimidating to start Googling this and watching YouTube videos because it's kind of all over the place, right? With these courses, there's a very thoughtful like learning tree that's been mapped out for you. So you start here and then they kind of bring you along the journey from, what is blockchain all the way down to like deploying your first smart contract, or, NFT gaming and how it works, or how to launch your own NFT. So yeah, and then once you've done these courses, right, once you've kind of worked through the logic and have a great understanding or a greater understanding, then resources like, GitHub, Stack Overflow are really great, because all of the projects that are building Web3 projects, all of their information is readily available on things like GitHub, on their documentation websites, and more. So then you can start to, at that point, find projects that really resonate with you, and then start reading through their docs, start looking at their GitHubs, and start seeing how on the back end they're building these products, and how engineers are kind of building and shaping the tools and the SDKs that these companies are building. But yeah, like I said, don't pay full price. They always go on sale, but it is worth that initial investment to really understand kind of in a dummy proof way, starting here, getting down to either here, how to do it. Because like I said, if you just start Googling and start looking at things, you're going to be like, oh my gosh, even me, I've been in the industry for a while, and there's still times where I'm like, oh, I know nothing. There's so much to know. It's so overwhelming. So I would recommend getting started with a course, since it kind of maps the initial introduction and outline for you. So I dropped the 3. So Axler is my company. We are hiring for technical and non-technical roles. ShakePay is the wallet that's Toronto-based, and then Dapper Labs. They're just really cool in general. I would check them out. They're doing some really cool stuff with NFTs, with gaming, and yeah, like I said, they have their own blockchain language, which is Flow. We work in in the languages that I highlighted before. ShakePay, I'm not too sure. I'd assume that they work in JavaScript from the front end, and the back end, probably a combination of a few languages, including Solidity and Rust. Yeah, I think just to wrap up, like Web3, there's a lot of really exciting opportunities. You're building things that are going to set a precedent in the industry as being the first. You're also building novel applications, novel tools, novel ideas. So there's a lot of kind of exciting applications. There's a lot of exciting, things that you can be part of, but you also along that process need to be kind of very self-aware, and also dictate, what you're comfortable with, the things that you like to work on, the thing, in the work styles that work best for you. And like I said, be a very kind of strong self-advocate, as a lot of the time there's a lot of work to do. There's deadlines that are very kind of very fast, and things move very quickly. And my biggest piece of advice was don't be caught up in that, and don't think because there's so many deadlines that there's no time to advocate for yourself. There's no time to really carve out, a place in the company, in the industry, and a working style that fits for you. So yeah, that would be my biggest piece. Also, don't give up your weekends, because it's very easy to get in the flow. It's like any startup, right? Get in the flow of working nights, working weekends. So yeah, have fun with it. Explore. There's a lot of things to learn, but also in the process, stay very kind of firm and steadfast in the things that you like, the styles that you like, and being an advocate for yourself and your community within Web3. So yeah, I think we're We're just over time there.
That was excellent, Kate. Thank you so much for that. Very, very fantastic
I think you're
presentation.
on mute.
And are you able to hear me? No? Nafal, do you want to try?
Okay, I'm gonna step in. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Fabulous, Kate. You are fabulous as usual. Thank you for all the advice. That was really good. Are there any final questions for Kate before we go? I know that we're starting to wrap up the day, and some people have meetings, but thank you so much, Kate. That was really insightful, and I know we're gonna have a lot of Web3 conversations. And I see your Telegram. That's fantastic.
Yeah, if anyone has
Everyone,
follow-up questions, hit me up on Telegram. Happy to chat there.
that's great. And congrats on your company, by the way. Looks fabulous.
Thanks.